So, guys, I've been doing a series called Elementia Book with Music. Now, I'm going to be doing chapter 2 for this. While I've been editing them, I've been listening to the book 3, which I have not finished, so that I can finish that up by the time it's time to do book 3. Which is connection. Okay.
This seemed to be the most common, as they were all over the place. But the players know others just night. Chapter 3. Chapter 2.
Good.
The first night.
Okay.
The trees around the pathway had been cleared out, so there was light shining down on the two players as they walked down the road to the village. There were no monsters on the path, but they spotted a few in the woods. Zombies seemed to be the most common, as they were all over the place, but the players noticed a few others too. Charlie pointed out, deep in the woods, what appeared to be a zombie, but thinner and less substantial. And Stan could have sworn that from what he could see in the dim light, it was holding a bow and had a quiver of arrows on its back. Once, when Stan looked up into the trees at the sides of the road, he saw a flash of blood-red eyes contemplating him from one of the higher limbs. None of these mysterious creatures, thankfully, pursued the players. "We'd better hurry and get to that village," said Charlie, looking nervous. "I don't want to be out here when it gets dark enough for those things to come out and hunt." Stan nodded in agreement, but things did not go well from that point on. The path became less clear as they went deeper into the woods, and a few times they found themselves accidentally straying onto side trails that led to dead ends. One of these paths turned out to have a zombie at the end of it. Stan and Charlie barely managed to outrun it before it lost interest in them. The sky began to turn a shade of beautiful pink, but the two players were unable to appreciate it as they made their way back onto the main road after their 5th detour and saw no sign of a village when they looked ahead. "I think we'd better make a shelter for the night," said Stan. "We'd better make a wall 2 blocks high so that we have at least some type of barrier that the monsters won't be able to get over easily." "You're right," said Charlie. "I'll go get some dirt blocks. You try to get some wood from those trees. Meet back here once you've got the stuff." Stan nodded, and the two set off in opposite directions. Gathering the dirt was faster than Charlie had expected. After being hit a few times, the blocks of dirt came loose, ready to be picked up and added to Charlie's inventory. He had amassed a whole stack of dirt blocks by the time he went back to meet Stan. Stan did not have nearly as easy a time. He had to punch the sections of the tree trunk over and over to get them to break off. It hurt too. "What I wouldn't do for chainsaw," Stan growled through gritted teeth as he punched the tree trunks, leaving the leaves suspended in mid-air. Stan was quickly realizing that Minecraft didn't always follow the laws of physics. After about an hour, the players met back on the road, and by the time night had fallen, they had constructed a small rectangular box out of dirt and wood, 2 blocks high on all sides, with no roof. They ate their first pieces of bread, and then hunkered down in their fort. "Brace yourself," said Stan. "The attacks should start any minute." Charlie gulped and pulled out his sword. But to their surprise, nothing happened for quite some time. They just sat in their shelter, hoping no monsters would show. They popped their heads up over the wall every now and then to make sure that there was nothing, and in fact, nothing was what they saw every time. When the half moon was at its highest point in the sky, Stan was about to say that there were no monsters around and that they should break camp and continue, when an arrow whizzed past him, grazing his shirt sleeve. "Incoming!" he yelled to Charlie as a firestorm of arrows began to fly over their heads. Charlie ducked. He looked through a small gap in the wall and saw about 4 animated skeletons, all standing at a distance from their shelter and raining arrows down on them. He stared at them, but he jumped back from the hole a second later as his view was obscured by the head of a zombie. "Zombies!" Charlie yelled to Stan. "And skeletons too! There's a ton of them and—" He looked through a few other cracks in the sides of their shelter. "They're swarming the wall!" He was right. From all sides, the 4 skeletons were firing arrows at the players, and about 6 zombies were forming a rabble around their fort, trying to walk straight through the wall. But the horror didn't stop there. Something large had fallen down from the trees and landed right behind a cowering Stan. Without thinking, Stan whipped around and slashed his sword as hard as he could. He made contact. The monster was knocked back, and he sliced at it many more times before it finally died. Then he got his first good look at it, and his heart gave a terrified jolt. Stan was staring at the dead body of the largest spider he had ever seen. It had a whole mess of glowing red eyes on its head. The rest of its hairy body was dark grey. Stan knew then that this was what he had seen up in the trees during the day. The spider's body vanished, leaving a thread of fine string in its place. More spiders began dropping from the trees. "Charlie, help me!" cried Stan as he tried to beat back the horde of spiders with his wooden sword. Charlie yelled in horror as he saw the spiders rushing his friend, and he used his sword to get the attention of a few of the monsters that had focused on Stan. In the midst of the attack, Stan managed to cut away the tree limb above them that the spiders were climbing along to drop into their shelter, effectively cutting off the flow of arachnids from above. "We won't have to worry about them anymore," sighed Stan. However, he turned out to be quite wrong. The spiders were able to climb over their wall to attack them. The players resigned themselves to the fact that they would have to battle the spiders all night long, and they put their backs to each other and drew their swords. It was a long, hard night. The supply of spiders was seemingly endless, and the players couldn't lift their heads up too high thanks to the barrage of arrows flying overhead. Miraculously, neither of the players lost any health that first night. The spiders attacked them, but Stan and Charlie managed to keep the giant bugs at bay and killed them with wild, frenzied sword slashes. After a few hours, the sky began to turn pink and then blue. The storm of arrows ceased. Spiders stopped climbing over the walls. The players were safe. "That," mumbled Charlie wearily, "was a very long night." He slid back against the wall. "Yeah, I want to sleep too, but we have to go," said Stan through a poorly stifled yawn. "We have to make it to the Adorian village before nightfall, or we'll have to put up with all those spiders again." "You're right. I guess we should go." Charlie stood up, but then he screeched and quickly crouched back down. "What is it?" asked Stan. "Don't look over the wall. Just don't," whimpered Charlie. He sounded petrified. Stan looked over the wall. What he saw made his stomach flip. The road ahead of them was covered with spiders. They were everywhere, crawling around and getting into fights with one another. There were no zombies or skeletons left, but there were so many spiders that Stan's knees failed him and he sank down next to Charlie. "Why aren't they dead?" asked Stan. "I thought that monsters burnt in the sunlight." "Well, apparently the spiders don't. What do we do? Fight them all?" Charlie looked at their wooden swords. They were covered with spider guts from the previous night. Through the door, Charlie could see that they didn't have much more left in them. A few more hits and the swords would break apart. "No, that's a bad idea," said Stan. Then something occurred to him. "Hey, Charlie, if these spiders are still here, then why aren't they climbing over the wall to attack us like they did last night?" Charlie thought about it. "Well, that's a fair point. Do you think that spiders only attack at night?" Stan knew what he had to do. "I guess there's only one way to find out." He started to walk towards the wall. "Hey, where are you going?" yelled Charlie. "I'm going to see if these spiders are going to attack me if I'm outside the wall." "But what if they do?" "Then I'm dead." "Dude, no, you can't. You have a better idea?" "Well, I didn't think so." Stan began to climb over the wall again. "Wait," said Charlie. He handed Stan his sword. "Take this," he said. "Yours is about to break, and if you have to fight off all those spiders, you'll need a sword." "Thanks. Wish me luck," said Stan with a nervous catch in his voice. He jumped over the wall and closed his eyes. Nothing happened. Stan opened his eyes. The spiders were still minding their own business, as if Stan had never scaled the wall. As Stan tiptoed tentatively among the spiders, none of them even acknowledged his existence. He did this as hastily as he could, not wanting to take any chances, and he didn't stop until he came to a portion of the road not littered with spiders. "It's okay, Charlie. They're not hostile. You can come over now." Charlie was petrified, and his blocky hands were shaking as he collected the string from the dead spiders within their fort. Perhaps they would find a use for it later, scaled the wall, and sprinted through the pack of spiders to join his friend. "Well," Charlie said with a sigh, "I'm glad that's over." Stan nodded. "Amen to that." "Hey, look!" He walked over to a pile of bones and arrows. He picked up one of the bones. One of those skeletons must have dropped this when it burnt up in the sunlight. He handed the bone to Charlie. "You think it could be useful?" "Check the book," Charlie replied, now examining the arrows. "Look up bones and arrows in there." Stan opened the book to the items section and read aloud. Bones. Bones are items dropped by skeletons when killed. Bones have two main uses. One can craft a bone into bone meal, or use the bone to tame a wild wolf into a dog. This may take multiple bones. Arrows. Arrows are items that can either be found when dropped by a dead skeleton, or crafted from flint, sticks, and feathers. Arrows can be fired as projectiles out of either a bow or a redstone dispenser. They are also shot by skeletons. Stan closed the book. "Looks like the bones will come in handy if we run into a wolf. And we better get a bow so we can use these arrows." Charlie agreed, and the two broke their shelter down, saving the materials for later use. They began walking back down the path, en route for the Adorian village, with plenty of daylight and the prospect of a day of smooth sailing ahead of them. They had just stopped to eat their last pieces of bread when something jumped out of the woods. It was a player holding a sword made out of what looked like stone, pointing right at Stan's heart. Chapter 3. Mines and Creepers. This player had the same body as Stan and Charlie.
Well, that was it. That was it. Got a little sneak peek by accident. I was just testing them out to see if some of these are still working. I'm gonna put 2 of these videos up in one day, so it doesn't matter that you got a sneak peek.